I think the joy, the reason I'm able to sort of feel so confident in my Punjabiness is because I was never subjected to that shaming. You know, if I spoke Punjabi, ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦਾ ਸੀ ਨਾ, they would never say ਤੂੰ ਗਲਤੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ or anything like that. They would be like, you know, just try, ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹਾ. That's good, that's fine.
Hello and welcome to Jaipur Bytes, the official podcast of the Jaipur Literature Festival. This is the 18th edition. 18th edition, a confluence of ideas. And confluence is something that I think you know quite well, and we'll just come to that. But how does it feel to be here at this Mahakumbh of literature?
It's incredible. It's just such a wonderful honor to be, you know, the whole journey of this book has been about my relationship to India. It started in 2014 with a trip to see my family where I felt I was about to lose a sense of connection through the passing of my elders. I came back in 2020 with the idea of Both Not Half, just its genesis really, to do my TED Talk in Chandigarh, and now to be returning to India with the book, with the whole journey really sort of reaching its conclusion, or at least the end of this chapter of the adventure. It just feels so perfect and beautiful, and yeah, I'm just overjoyed.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I'm truly so delighted to see Both Not Half become a book. Before we talk about the journey of it finally coming in print and in your hands, I want to go back to little Jassa growing up, and the idea of this, well, seemingly white-looking kid speaking Punjabi and trying to balance that idea wherein a lot of Punjabi families would tell their Punjabi children that, look at him, your Punjabi is not that good, look at his, it's so good. Whereas you were also dealing with a very colonial hangover, a sort of white gaze where you were growing up. How was it to balance those identities at that age?
You know, when I was very young, I had no concept of any of these things. I was just me. I was my full and whole self. And I think the joy, the reason I'm able to sort of feel so confident in my Punjabiness is because I was never subjected to that shaming. You know, if I spoke Punjabi, ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦਾ ਸੀ ਨਾ, they would never say ਤੂੰ ਗਲਤੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ or anything like that. They would be like, you know, just try, ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹਾ. That's good, that's fine. So, you know, there was just love and support. And I think that's when people ask me, when a lot of, you know, parents ask me, how do I get my kids to speak Punjabi? They're often, those kids are just terrified of being embarrassed. And it's often because as soon as they try, they stumble, they make a mistake, and then some, you know, elder steps in and is like, no, you've got it wrong. Like, why can't you speak properly? Like, all of that. So for me, it was just, yeah, I was able to make mistakes. I still make mistakes. But I've got the confidence now to, you know, it doesn't matter. As long as I'm being understood, making connections. For me, Punjabi was the language of connection and love with my Biji, my Dadiji. And, you know, and I say in the book, you know, for her, English was a second language. She never expected to move to the UK. She hated English at school. So I think she sort of understood what it meant to struggle with a second language. And so she never made me feel in any way inferior for whenever I was struggling. So, yeah, it was just love and support.
Right. And was Punjabi the language of disciplining you, of humoring you, and were you getting exposed to that from an early age? Those little words in Punjabi that are told to kids?
So this is where my mum, so my mum was great as well. So my English mum learnt some Punjabi in order to, so, you know, at home we would mix the language. It'd be like, oh, do you want a glass? Do you want a glass of pani? Put the dud back in the fridge, all that stuff. And then if I was like messing around, it would be, you know, hatja, chopkar, bertja, those things. That, so my mum was able to sort of blend those languages as well. So yeah, it was a real mix. You know, I've always said the book is called Both Not Half because I'm rejecting the idea that I'm half Punjabi, half English. I am both those things fully. And I got that bothness from my parents. They raised me as both. The half I talk of is the halfness that society at large seems to want to impose on people. There seems to be a resistance to multiplicity of identity.
No, but that term I find quite interesting because even though you were struggling with finishing the book because you were thinking like an academic and not like a
Yeah.
storyteller, but it is an academic intervention. It theorizes it in a way wherein you do see it as this larger consequence of colonialism, of this idea of these mixed heritage, and that mixed heritage not being seen as one that is proper or pure, right? But you had to shift your mode while telling the story. You had to stop being so hard on yourself and as an academic, right?
Yes, I think I had an idea when I started writing the book that I was trying to, be the next William Dalrymple or something, and like, because his books, White Moguls was such a big influence on me, and I realized, well, actually, I realized through speaking to my sister, to my mum, to my flatmate at the time. My flatmate at the time, actually, when I had a moment of crisis, turned around and said to me, "Is this book perhaps a bit of a vanity project?" And that stung quite a lot. And it stung because there was an element of truth to it. I was writing from a place of wanting to be an author, an authority, the sort of a leading voice, and I had to let go of that and embrace the fact that I wrote my TED talk as when I wrote it, it was just a personal essay. It was for me to understand who I was and what my narrative was. That TEDx Chandigarh then reached out and asked me to do a TED talk was pure coincidence. I just happened to have the talk ready to go. So yes, after having those conversations with my flatmate and my sister and my mum, I remembered I'm a storyteller, I'm an actor, I'm a filmmaker. I understand story and character, and so I approached the book. I sort of restructured all of it as a story, as a narrative. And once I understood that I was telling a story of essentially a young boy who was sort of in this beautiful, naive state, grows up to become a 20-something-year-old man who suddenly finds himself unable to find a sense of place in the world and then has to go on an adventure of discovery to discover this idea, both not half, that you can be whole and multiple and not fractured and fractional. And then what it means to return with that knowledge, how that knowledge then changes my relationship with national identity, gender and sexuality, the politics of class, and then finally it sort of comes full circle into a broader philosophical idea of what it means to embrace non-duality. And for me personally, I realized in that moment that both not half was my own expression of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's idea of ik. And so that's the final chapters, one, not both.
I do think that that oneness that you find in so many Indic traditions, that kind of oneness is sort of, you're deprived of it when you do operate within the colonial framework, because it was all about making as many categories as you could so that there are as many divisions as possible within them. While doing your own storytelling and while not thinking like an academic, you would still have to go back to history to trace your heritage. What were some of those exciting and surprising moments in time that you travel back to just get a sense of your own self, colonial India, Punjabi literature, whatever it may be?
I think what was really surprising was discovering that, not surprising, but maybe, I don't quite know what the word is, but discovering that there was a history. There was a time in India where somebody who looked as white as me, who speaks Punjabi or Hindi or Hindustani in the way that I do, whenever I have a conversation with a taxi driver or a tuk-tuk driver or anyone, it's always surprise, engagement. It's always a bit of a moment. But there was a time where that wasn't remarkable, where it was understood, and somebody like me could have been understood within the context of Eurasians and Anglo-Indians and the sort of the rich hybridity that did exist. Which is not to say that there was not division and hierarchy, but that division and hierarchy was, as it has always been, along class boundaries. And it was only then, and what was interesting, I think that was what I found quite touching and moving, is that when you get the rise of scientific racism, white supremacy, the mixed heritage person becomes the battleground for that. And so you see mixed people being legislated against. They can no longer hold, civil service or military positions within the East India Company, or later the sort of the government, and that was really fascinating because I'd always felt like the history of race, that mixed people had always been sort of on the fringe or a footnote in the history of race, and actually doing this research and thinking about it in the way that I realized that mixed people are actually at the very heart of it. That's where our very existence sort of makes it obvious that ideas of race are a lie, are a construct, are a fiction.
And I'm glad that you mentioned earlier that the book White Mughals had an impact on you. It also touches upon how what you just said. There was a time in colonial India where you would have what was called a white Mughal, this British man who would wear stuff like, well, something like what I am wearing, like an angrakha, and speak in Hindustani and stay in Delhi. And that was the lingua franca of the time, and that was the identity of time, which has faded away. But I'm glad that you are restoring faith in histories that are more inclusive. So thank you for that, Jassa. White Mughals, interesting. Tell us about more literature that you consumed as a kid and the kind of media that you were consuming. Because even there, you've talked about how when movie houses were looking for actors and they would say, we're looking for a mixed race actor, you wouldn't, somebody like you wouldn't even feature in the list.
No, no, yeah. In the UK, mixed race is very much, or had at that time become, I mean, still sort of is, had become a shorthand for black and white mixes, so sort of light-skinned black. And yeah, I just realized that there was no opportunity within the UK casting, TV, film world for me to explore my heritage. Even when I got the opportunity to audition for a stage production of The Jungle Book, I grew up watching The Jungle Book, the Disney cartoon, totally enamored with Mowgli, because when I used to come to India as a kid, I would pack my red underpants and I would play around in the monsoon rain until I was covered in mud, and I would be Mowgli. I'd been to Delhi Zoo, I'd seen the real life Bagheera and Shere Khan, and I had this opportunity to audition for the stage production. And it was bizarre because suddenly I realized as I was speaking the lines that this was the story of a young boy caught between two worlds, who's trying to find a sense of belonging. And then it was really jarring because the director was like correcting the white director, British director, correcting my pronunciation of stuff like Bandarlog and it was like bizarre to have that very jarring experience. And and then I didn't get it. I mean, I don't know, it might just be I did a bad audition, but it was just I felt so connected to it, and I just never felt like I was going to get the opportunity, and I haven't really had the opportunity to explore my Punjabiness through my work as an actor, which is where the Both Not Half journey then came from, because I just recorded some comedy sketches of myself speaking Punjabi, put them on Instagram, and then it sort of, everything snowballed from there. And really the title Both Not Half came from there, because when I posted that first video, the only hashtag I used was white Punjabi. That was the only, it just made, it was a description of what I thought I was. And then is when I was scrolling through the hundreds of comments, I came across one comment that said, there was somebody tagging her friend saying, this guy speaks better Punjabi than us, and he's only half. And in seeing the words only half, something just sort of clicked in that instant, and I just responded, hashtag both, not half. And and now I'm here.
When you were very young and you came to, and you just come to India, there is a very interesting story, and I know you talk about it in your TED Talk, but I think our viewers over here and our people over here would also love to listen to it.
It's the Wagah border.
At the water bottle and the Wagah border. Please tell us, that moment of surprise that you've always had on people.
Yeah, so the last time, this was the last trip in 2006. It was the last time I was in Jaipur, actually. After visiting Rajasthan, we went to up to Punjab, to Amritsar, which I'm actually heading there this evening. And we visited the Wagah border. And I was 15 years old. I hadn't really had enough water that day, so I had a bit of a headache. And I had a big bottle of water on me, so I was trying to replenish. and I was just sort of sat on the rickshaw just waiting for something, and a water seller came up to me and was trying to desperately sell me a bottle of water. He was like, well, you know, water, cold water, and I was like, no, it's just fine. I don't need any water. I'm fine. Thank you, thank you. I was just trying to do the whole sort of polite Englishman thing. Didn't really want to get into a conversation. He was like, no, sir, very cold water. And so I was like, yeah, it's all right, I've got water, it's okay. And he's like, sir, it's very hot, you will need more water. I was like, it's fine, it's like it's ice cold. And he like puts the bottle of water into my hand, and then I just sort of snapped, and I was just like, oh, chhad de yaar, mera sir paadda pya, kinni wari main kya, mere kol pani hai, kise hor nu tang kar yaar. And then he was just like, just stopped, and I thought I'd upset him, but then he just like called out, like, "Aajo sare, Punjab da gora aa gaya." And then suddenly I had this like huge crowd around me of people, and I had to sort of explain my backstory. But yeah, that was the anecdote with which I opened my TED talk.
How fun.
Yeah.
You've talked about elsewhere that Punjabi and especially stories, childhood stories, helped you connect with your grandparents. How was that, going back to this very nascent period of Punjabi literature and looking at these young stories and telling them to your
Oh,
grandparents?
so after I came to Punjab in 2014, that was my first time sort of coming back as an adult, and that was when I realized that, you know, the elders that had known me all my life weren't going to be around forever, and that I felt that my connection to India and to my heritage would one day be lost through their passing. And so I came back determined to deepen that connection. And I determined to do that through, I've always been able to speak Punjabi, but I've never really been able to read and write. But I decided to learn to read. And so I did like a 5-day intensive course on YouTube, learned the Gurmukhi scripts, and which was a much better way of learning it actually, rather than doing the sort of the road ura stuff. And I got to a point where I could very slowly start to read Punjabi words and sentences. And so I found just children's stories online, and I would go and sit with my granddad, my dadaji, and I would just sit with him and read very slowly in Punjabi, and he would correct my mistakes, and I would learn new words. And it was just a beautiful way of, you know, spending time together. And I really, really cherish those memories.
How lovely. Jessa, how did it feel after you overcame your hesitation of writing as an academic, embracing the storyteller that you are? And you said you're an actor, you're a filmmaker, you're a producer, but you forgot to mention that you're also an artist. That also comes from your mom, I believe.
Yes, I don't know whether I would describe myself as an artist, but yeah, my mum is definitely an artist, as is my sister. I dabble. I guess collectively I'm an artist.
But as a creative.
As
you
a
know,
creative,
you
yeah.
are. So how did it feel to finally overcome that and see that book in your hands in print, the first copy when it arrived?
It still doesn't feel real. I have moments where like I see it on my own bookshelf at home, and I just like the words that I wrote on they're like there, and it's there, and it's physical. Yeah, it still doesn't feel quite real. And I sometimes I like just if I pass it at home, I'll just flick the page open to just any random page, and it's a bizarre experience because I think, you know, we're all here because we love books and we read, but we also know we have this infuriating thing where we often read books and then there's bits you can't remember it, and you're like, oh, I can't believe I spent so long with that book and I was so invested in it, and now I've sort of bits have faded away, and you might reread or you dip in and you're like, I don't even remember that bit. But with my book, it's like I go back to it and it's like every single sentence, word, I know exactly where it is straight away, and it's also just a lovely way of, you know, I did tell a story. And I think, you know, memory is a strange thing because it's sort of amorphous, and, you know, things change sometimes when you reflect. And what I like about this, in a way, is that at least on this journey, I've sort of made decisions about what the story is and how it came together. Which is not to say I've made things up or anything, but I think we remember things in a particular way. And I like that I have that in a way preserved, and that's largely also because, you know, I journal quite a bit as a way to sort of keep track of my sanity, and it's lovely to have a physical thing, a book, that I can go back to. I think, in 5, 10 years, 20 years, if I end up having kids or something, it'll be wonderful to be like, this is where my head was at between, 2019 and 2005, or even 2014. Here's a decade of where I was figuring some stuff out. I think that's just really exciting. I'm excited to see what changes, what in 10 years time I look back on and be like, do I still think that? At the moment, it still feels fine. I'm happy with it.
No, I think right now is the time to be happy, because how fabulous it is to have an archive of your own memory and identity, and how inspiring it is for so many of us to read it. Because even though, and I say it again, you did not write like an academic, but you have made an intervention which has quite literally reassured and restored hope in a lot of people across the world. And thank you for that, Jassa. Thank you for writing, and thank you for doing
Thank you
what
so much
do.
for saying that. That's incredibly lovely. That fills me with joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jassa. And thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of Jaipur Bytes. And thank you to all of you for joining us over here. Thank you.